thrive in the business jungle.
Welcome to Digital Leadership Lessons from Survival Training. I'm Florian Kneubühl, Project Manager, Survival Trainer, and someone who combines both the wilderness outside and change in companies. In each episode, I tell a story from nature and what it teaches us about leadership, clarity, and trust. Today's story is about a day in the fog. A day when we lost our way, and I learned what it really means to stay on course in uncertain times. The fog. It was an October morning in the Lucerne countryside. There were 5 of us on the road, a few friends, backpacks, hiking boots, good spirits. At first, everything was clear. The air smelled of earth and damp grass. The sky was still blue, but the higher we climbed, the thicker the fog became. At first it was a veil, then a wall. After 4 hours walking, the sky had disappeared. We could barely see our own feet. The path had vanished, as had the horizon. It was deathly quiet. No wind, no birds, just the occasional distant ringing of a cowbell far down in the valley. And in this silence, in this grey, we began to realize we no longer know where we are. No mobile phone, no compass, no map. Just the thought, there must be a path somewhere down there. It's amazing how quickly certainty can turn into uncertainty. An hour earlier, we had been laughing, joking, and taking photos. Now we were walking in silence, each of us preoccupied with our own thoughts. The fog wasn't just creeping around us, it was creeping into us. And at some point, you notice how the tone changes. The conversations become shorter, the steps become heavier, your gaze turns downwards. Decision. The descent. After a while, we found ourselves standing on a slope. To our right, the forest dropped away steeply, densely covered with conifers, damp, slippery. I knew that if we continued straight ahead, we would end up going in circles. I sensed the mood changing. One of them asked quietly, "Florian, are you sure we're in the right place?" I wasn't sure at all, but I knew that not making a decision is also a decision, and usually the worst one. So I said, "We're going down. There must be a path somewhere down there. We just have to keep going." We began the descent cautiously. Every step was a risk. The moss under our shoes was wet, the branches slippery, the terrain steep. It was exhausting, and everyone in the team reacted differently. One talked a lot, too much. Another one became completely silent, and one cursed quietly to himself. It's the same in a project. When fog rolls in, everyone reacts differently. Loudly, quietly, hectically, or hesitantly. As a manager, you have to be able to deal with that. The turning point. After almost 2 hours of descent, tired, thirsty, with a scratchy throat, I heard it again. First very quietly, then more clearly, cowbells. This sound was like an anchor. A simple sound, but it gave us direction. We followed the sound. And then suddenly we were standing in a pasture. The fog hadn't lifted, but it was lighter. And there were cows. The smell of earth, grass, and life. Shortly afterwards, we reached the gravel road. and after another hour, the village. We were exhausted, thirsty but overjoyed. And I thought, it's fascinating how small a thing can be that gets you back on track. Sometimes a sound, a sign, a person who says, "This way," is enough. Business transfer. When I think back on that day, I see many parallels with projects. Because in business, there is the same fog. You start with a clear goal, a strategy, a plan. And then it happens. Priorities change, resources disappear, stakeholders suddenly want something else. Or as I like to quote Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Suddenly you can only see 3 meters ahead. You hear nothing but expectations, pressure, and sometimes the silence of those who are watching you. That's exactly when it's decided who leads. Leadership doesn't mean knowing the map. Leadership means keeping moving step by step. It's not about always being right. It's about taking responsibility, showing direction, even when you yourself are uncertain. Because people don't follow those who know everything. They follow those who act when others hesitate. Those who remain calm in the fog provide stability. Those who trust themselves create trust. I often thought about this moment later. The feeling of seeing nothing and yet continuing on. That is exactly what leadership and change is. When you lead 200 people, 10 teams, 3 countries, you never see everything. But you can hear signals, recognize patterns, sense moods. And sometimes it's just like with cowbells. A small sign is enough to guide you. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. Leadership lesson. What I learned from this day. First, orientation is not a state. It is a process. You don't get it once and for all. You have to create it again and again. Second, leadership begins when visibility ends. Anyone can lead when everything is clear, but those who lead in the fog inspire trust. Third, decisions are like steps in the fog. You never see the end, but you have to take them anyway. Indecision is like standing still on a slope. It costs energy and gets you nowhere. Fourthly, communication is orientation. Your team needs your inner compass, values, principles, attitude. And fifthly, leadership is also humility. Because no matter how experienced you are, sometimes you need the bell, the sign that reminds you where you are. I call this the cowbell principle. In every situation, look for the small, clear signal that will bring you back on track. It's always there. You just have to notice it. Reflection. When was the last time you were in the fog? In a project? In life? In everyday life? Where did you feel your compass? Perhaps the story will help you stay calm the next time the path disappears. Because just like out in the mountains, the same applies in business. Visibility is never the decisive factor. Attitude is. Thank you for listening. I'm Florian Kneubühl. That was episode 2, How to Stay on Course in the Fog, from the podcast series Digital Leadership Lessons from Survival Training. Survive the wilderness, thrive in the business jungle.
thrive in the business jungle.